Hello everybody! The next plane off the pile is a Stanley number 62 low angle block plane. Let's take a look at it. The 62 is specifically designed for planing end grain and is well suited for doing something like a butcher block top. Stanley calls it a block plane, but it's the exact same size as a Stanley number 5. There's a look at them from the side. Book value for a 62 is between $300 and $600, so they're just a little bit salty. This old 62 has had a rough life. Most of the Japanning on the front is missing, and there's some really bad signs of pitting all over the entire plane. There's a close look at this side. There's a look at the bottom. It's especially bad up here towards the front. And there's a look at the left side. Another good thing is it's a sweetheart. I love the old sweetheart planes. So let's break it down. And there she is, all broken down. So now that you see all the parts, you realize that this old number 62 is a jack plane with block plane parts. And a lot of these parts are unique to this plane and this plane only. For example, there's a threaded nickeled cast iron disc right here. That bolt that holds the knob in place threads into that disc, holding the knob to the disc. There's 4 little metal tabs right there to keep it from slipping and turning around. You've got an eccentric lever that's much larger than that on a regular block plane, and the front knob is unique. The height and profile of this plane is not like any other knob on any other Stanley plane. You've got your front plate, which is much larger than what's on a regular block plane. Your nickeled lever cap. Got a beveled up iron. This iron is seated at 12 degrees. Right here, very shallow depth in that bed. Depth adjuster it's a little bit larger around than a regular depth adjuster on the 60 series planes. And the adjusting block. And the tote, it's unique. So the tote knob, you just can't grab them off of number 5 and replace them on those that are broken on a 62. What's unique about it is it's short right here across the bottom, because if it wasn't, it'd bump up against your depth adjuster. Stanley made a lot of planes, and the number 62 is one of the better ones. Time to get to work on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is scrub it. Simple green and a toothbrush. The only reason I'm scrubbing is so that the stripper, when I put it on, it'll work better. And after the scrubbing is complete, I'm going to use those little scrapers, dental pick, to knock off as much loose Japanning as what I can before I put the stripper on. And that didn't take off a whole lot more of the Japanning, so it's on to the stripper. I keep the same brush and this little plastic tub. Use it over and over. I don't even clean the brush. It softens up again when I add stripper to it. Stripper goes on every bit of the black Japanning. And I'll leave that sit for 15 minutes to half an hour. And while the stripper does its thing, I'm going to use my homemade scraper to remove the lacquer from the tote and the knob. With a fresh burr on the scraper, it's going to make short work of this old finish. And after just a few minutes scraping, there's the old finish laying there. I'm going to finish them up with the sanding sponge, some 220 grit sandpaper, and some steel wool. That knob's going to go on my drill press using that bolt right there, and just hand sanding on the tote. Always do your sanding with the grain. With the sanding complete, both the tote and the knob look really good. And I wanted to point out on that bolt that I got running through there, that's electrical tape wrapped around the bottom. Made the right size to fit in the hole in the bottom of the knobs and hold them snug while they're on the drill press. And for that, it's over to my high-tech paint booth. Going to apply multiple thin coats, usually 3 at a time with the light sanding in between. And while the lacquer coats continue to build up, it's time to rinse off the base and the plate. And with the rinse complete, it's on to the sandblaster to prep the Japan surfaces for a new finish. The sandblasting is done, and I added a donor knob and some washers to pull the front plate up tight against the bottom so I can start the lapping of all the pits. When lapping any plane that has a plate like that, you got to have it in so the bottom and the plate itself laps evenly. So you can see this one here has got some work to do. Time to move on to the lapping station. I think the side should lap pretty good. The pitting isn't too bad. What I'm worried about is this front corner right here. That's where it's the deepest. So let's see what it's going to do. Lots of long, even strokes. And time. Frequent checks to see. You don't want to take off any more than what you have to. Always lapping with the original machine marks, which went from front to back. And with the lapping done, I am pleasantly surprised to see that it turned out better than I ever thought it would. Both sides look really good, and even the bottom isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Still a little bit of pitting up towards the front, but nothing that's going to distract too much from its overall appearance, and definitely not going to affect the way this thing planes the wood. And here's how the lever cap looks after it was cleaned up. Again, better than I thought it would. The nickel plating on the top part was gone from around the edges, but still remains in where the stippled area is. The plating on the sides remained intact, and so did the plating on the bottom. So all in all, the lever cap came out really good. I used 1000, 3000, 5000 grit sandpaper to polish up those edges around the outside where it should have been nickel plated. The next thing I'm going to do is tape off the parts that I don't want to get the new finish on. And after the tape is done, it goes into my paint booth, where I'm going to start the buildup of multiple coats of finish. I'll be applying probably anywhere from 6 to 10 light coats. And while the first coat dries on the plain bottom, I'm back to the tote and knob. They've had 6 coats of lacquer so far with a sponge sanding and steel wool in between after coat number 3, and I'm getting ready to sponge sand and steel wool again. I like to use the sponge sanders for this because they last a long time and they reduce the likelihood that I'm going to sand through the lacquer like it would if I used some type of a hard sanding block that didn't have the flexibility. The next thing I'm going to do is put on a new decal. When Stanley made this plane, it's a sweetheart version. They put the decal on the tote. I reproduce and sell the decals in sheets of 14 or individual. That's both the old and the new style. If you want decals, send me an email and we'll work it out. And after applying the new decal, I'm going to put on 3 more coats of lacquer to make sure it stays there and to finish the tote. So with the finishes progressing just fine over my paint booth, it's time to get to work on the iron. For that, I'm going to use my lapping station combined with sandpaper, 150 grit, I think that's 3000 grit, and sandpaper that's rolled up. The rolled up sandpaper is going to be used to get inside the slot. So the iron cleaned up pretty nice. That's the front side, and there's a look at the back side. Next step is to put a 25-degree bevel on that iron. And that magic happens on my lapping station. This iron's got quite a bit of pitting on it, so this is going to take a little while to lap it out. With the sharpening completed, the back side of the iron is looking really good, and so is the front side. The plain bottom and the plate have had about 8 coats of finish put on them, and now it's time to apply the final finish. The final finish is applied in one even coat. And after about 7 or 8 coats total of lacquer on the tote and knob, this is what they look like, and I think they look great. And my last coat of lacquer is dried for about 15 minutes. I want to pull the tape off while it's still a little bit soft. And now that the tape is removed, I can unleash my dirty oil rag. And just like savoir-faire, the dirty oil gets rubbed everywhere. And I'm going to let those parts with the dirty oil sit for as long as I can. The next thing to do is to work on the small parts. I use a piece of sandpaper in the screw slots, double the thickness up, triple, whatever you got to do to make it fit tight, and most of the rest of the work will be done on the wire wheel. And there's a look at the cleaned up small parts. The next thing I'm going to do to them is give them a coat of the rem oil. And with that done, the hardest part of the restoration is completed. There it is, all the parts are finished. I got to wipe the dirty oil off and wipe the rem oil off and give everything a coat of wax. And there she is, oiled, waxed, and ready to be put back together. Looking really good. Considering all the pitting that there was, it's better than what I ever thought it was going to turn out. The new finish on the base looks great. And the freshly lapped sides look really good too. It's time to put her back together. And oh, the old number 62 looks good. Take a look at her from all angles and all sides. The biggest distraction is on the bottom. A little bit of staining, a little bit of pitting, but it is dead flat and ready to go to work. That means it's time to give it a test drive. First I'm going to see what it'll do on some 1 5/8 inch poplar. Just like I thought, it handles it effortlessly. But that's not what this old plane was made for. So it doesn't yet pass the test. This old plane was made to do end grain. The only piece of substantial wood that I've got that has end grain is this chunk right here, and it is kind of substantial. You can see where it was cut off, and there's about a 1/16 of an inch. A little area edge right there where the saw didn't do it perfectly flush. So I would say the number 62 ought to be able to take that off and smooth it up. About like the mission has already been accomplished. I turn the chunk around and I'm coming in from the other side to avoid splitting it out. Now I can say this old plane passes the test. That 7.5 by 5.5 inch chunk of end grain cleaned up nice, and there's the spoils, the proof of what it can do. So this old 62 low angle block plane will probably be going on eBay during the first week of November. I got quite a few I need to list. I've been gathering up. I procrastinated the last couple months. Haven't done any new listings. Gonna do it all at once. And if you want to make a reasonable offer where it's in the range of book price, you can get it from me before it goes on eBay. Just send me an email. That's the best way to contact me. If you look at my homepage on YouTube, it's under the About tab. There's where the email address is. So this turned out much better than I thought it would. It's a beautiful old plane. It's on to the next one off the pile, but for now it's time for supper. Bye.